Grazie al dottor Volkmar. Thank you, Fred, for your very interesting, fascinating presentation, and for the time, exact time. So, Italian late, American exact. Thank you. Thank you. Now, io vorrei adesso sollecitare un quarto d'ora, 20 minuti di discussione. Se qualcuno ha qualche questione, qualche domanda ai nostri relatori, essi saranno lieti di rispondere. No, I have a question, only little question. La faccio in italiano la domanda. Allora, l'autismo colpisce maggiormente il sesso maschile. Yes. Allora, qual è la vostra opinione sull'effetto di ormoni maschili durante lo sviluppo? Possono eventualmente deteriorare lo sviluppo durante la crescita, gli ormoni maschili? Oppure è una teoria non perseguibile questa? E un'altra piccola question, a little question, è la possibile esposizione a sostanze infiammatorie tipo cytokines durante la gravidanza. È possibile che questi possono colpire i geni che poi danno derangement, disturbo nello sviluppo cerebrale? E queste due domande per Nancy. One question for Fred. One. Fred, my dear. E allora siamo abituati a Fred Volkmar noi sappiamo che gli autisti, i bambini autistici hanno una modalità periferica di sguardo e questa è una modalità che può eventualmente compensare la loro incapacità di guardare negli occhi, dico dal punto di vista per esempio del trattamento, questa possibilità, ok? Thank you. Il microfono spento.
Is that on? Is it on? Yeah.
Yes.
You've asked two excellent questions, and the reason they're so excellent is we don't have very many answers yet to these. We certainly know there's a difference in how the male brain develops in response to the sex hormones. The other issue is, I think there was a recent report about a gene on the X chromosome. The male gets one. Of course, a female gets two. And if you happen to not get the X chromosome as a male that carries a particular gene, then that's one explanation. But I'm sure that's not a lot. I think there's probably other people who answer this question better than I. But it's a very interesting issue. And your second question? Cytokines. Oh, cytokines. Oh my.
Durante la gravidanza, in gravidanza, è prenatal exposition. Prenatal exposition of inflammatory substance. Cytokine or others. Inflammatory. Mm-hmm. Okay? Inflammation during the gestation.
again, you've hit an area that I don't think we know a great deal about, and I know probably only a small part of that. I think the issue is it cytokines just non-specifically? Can it be any infection, or is there also a role of the particular infection and the areas of the brain that it has a predilection for? We hear a lot about fetal cytomegalovirus infection, which is one of the few infections that can cause a congenital malformation, agenesis or the corpus callosum. But I don't know how much of a role cytokines play in most cases. Do you, Fred?
Okay. There's a little research, not much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me say a word about the eyes.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Thank you, Nancy.
So the question has to do with, essentially, is gaze contact avoided? Is gaze aversion? Do people become anxious by looking at faces? Okay? Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay. So the question, everybody else can hear, you can't hear. The question is gaze actually avoided actively, or I would argue probably more that it's just less relevant? And there's an interesting discussion on both sides. I think the problem is if the face isn't much of a source of information, why look? And then everything else becomes much more relevant. But it does get us back to thinking about what Connor was saying in the first place. Now, you do see children, especially more impaired children, who seem to actually want to avoid they avoid eye contact, but they avoid all other kinds of social contact as well, often to a great degree. But it's difficult to sort out because they have so many other problems going on. The eye tracking studies, the nice thing is the way it's done, it's totally invisible to the child, and it centers on the most sensitive part of the pupil. So it's looking at where the child's looking. Even if they're looking out of the corner of their eye, they're still looking using that part of the eye that's the most sensitive.
Okay, thank you, Fred. Another question?
Nancy Michaud, thank you for a very interesting presentation. What your idea about the lack or the unfunction of mirror neuron? Mirror neurons, or first, second, looking to the pathway of genes involved in damage, in autism damage, where is the involvement of unaltered mitochondrial biogenesis with decrease in ATP production?
I missed that. I'm sorry, I didn't. Let's do the first one, and then the second question.
Mirror neuron.
Yeah, mirror neurons.
Mirror neurons.
I don't talk about that very much because we have a paper. I was part of a paper published, I think it was this year, in Neural Report that did not support the mirror neuron system as dysfunctional. Did you read that paper?
Yes.
That's why you're asking me. Yes.
An absence of mirror neuron in a lot of autistic people, or unfunctional mirror neurons are present in autistic people.
In the monkeys,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Yeah.
In the monkeys.
Not all.
Surely, sicuramente nelle scimmie.
Sì.
Nell'uomo
Sure,
non
in the
siamo del
monkey.
tutto sicuri ancora.
But there are the PET analysis. PET analysis indicate this lack. And after mitochondrial biogenesis alteration with a lot decrease in ATP production. ATP may cause the damage. Mitochondrial biogenesis, do you know?
Agenesis? No.
Biogenesis.
Biogenesis, yes.
Yes, mitochondrial biogenesis with decrease in ATP production may be related, could be related with panel of gene involved. Because the gene involved are for the Ig part, a lot of this gene are kinases, phosphorylases. No?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yes.
Sono meccanismi chimici importanti, ma credo ancora non sono stati studiati nell'autismo, per cui volevamo dare la parola al collega per un'altra questione, un'altra domanda.
Grazie. Just before I ask the question, Nancy, we've just completing a mirror neuron study actually supports your finding that we can't find differences in mirror neurons between autistic and typically developing kids. And we actually reckon it's because a lot of the autistic kids, the mirror neuron findings, maybe a lot of them are actually not grasping the paradigm in the first place. And so the whole difference between mirror neurons is a greatly over-exaggerated story. There may be something there, but greatly exaggerated. Now, Fred, I just wanted to ask you a question about, you were looking at the eye tracking with kids. We've been finding some interesting results, not eye tracking studies, but observational studies, finding girls show much more eye contact than do boys. And I'm just wondering if you had looked at girls with your stuff and if you'd seen a gender difference, because that'd be fascinating.
So if I understood the question, I apologize, because we're two people separated by a common language, as Mark Twain once said. But in terms of the gender differences, there are some suggestions of gender differences. One of the whole things about the eye tracking paradigm, which now is very commercially available, and I think people are widely using it, and people are extending it to other disorders. So, for example, like attention deficit disorder and other kinds of things. It gets interesting in terms of thinking about gender differences. I was thinking in response to Dr. Minshew's earlier question, you know, there's Simon Baron-Cohen's book about the essential difference in his theory about the male-female brain. I can't say that I've looked at our own data to look at gender differences in eye tracking. One of the dilemmas with the very first studies we did, because we were talking about high-functioning people, of course, males are vastly overrepresented. And so there, you know, it's 25, 50 males to every single female. So that's one of the complexions. And I'd have to ask some of my colleagues about with the babies. It's a very interesting question. There certainly are, in terms of face perception, in the normal population, differences between males and females are somewhat interesting. And that would also be consistent with your potential observation. Also, of the more able people with autism, Asperger's, who are girls, clinically speaking, one's sort of anecdotal impression is that they're somewhat less socially impaired than the boys.